County Executive Committee to order, please. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please rise and follow along with me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 3 on the agenda, and that's public comment. Anybody, no one has addressed me. No one has contacted the clerk for public comment. So we'll move on to item number 4, and that's approval of the minutes of the August 15th, 2024 Executive Committee meeting minutes. What is your pleasure? The minutes were in your packet. Motion by Supervisor Drabek and second by Supervisor Pfeffrick. Any discussion on the minutes as presented? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of the motion to approve the minutes of the August 15th, 2024 Executive Committee meeting minutes that were in your packet signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? No. Motion carried and is unanimous. Fine, we'll move on to item number 5, policy issue and potential committee determination, a discussion regarding the 2025 annual budget development and policy recommendations from the committees for review of mandatory and discretionary program document and discussion of rates and fees. Any updates from any of the standing committees and or chairs on discussions that you've had at your various standing committees? Any discussion? Any, Administrator Leonard, do you have any updates on the budget development?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I gave an update at HR Finance yesterday. Of course, happy to answer any specific questions, but generally speaking, all of the standing committees have had a recurring item on their agenda relative to the budget. We've had a number of discussions at various committees about, I would call them nominal expansions of programs or service levels. For example, at Health and Human Services, there was a proposal to expand our beach testing program from the grant-related beach testing that is happening at the Big O Plain this year to all of the county-owned beaches. I believe the approximate cost of that is about $12,000. It was discussed at Health and Human Services and was approved. Similarly, there was a discussion at Health and Human Services about accepting, expanding our lead-related mitigation work in connection with a grant that was received by the City of Wausau, where we would be essentially contracted to provide some additional work there within the city limits. However, it does broadly support our county-wide efforts relative to lead mitigation. I was directed to include that in the budget. Similarly, all of the standing committees with jurisdiction over nonprofit agencies have provided their recommendations relative to continued funding at the level provided in the 2024 budget. That a formal resolution consistent with that will be taken up by the county board, I believe, this month. But generally speaking, there have been those nominal expansions in programs. I have at this point not received any direction to cut service level or reduce programs, which is, again, I think consistent with what largely has happened in the past relative to budget. So staff are working diligently to try to accommodate those things within the levy limit constraints. If there are specific questions about budget development, happy to try to answer those. We have received, as I think the full board knows, our net new construction amount, which we're calculating. Ballpark is about just shy of probably about $1 million of new revenue. However, at the same time, our budget assumptions that the board directed and approved provide for employee compensation that essentially eats up more than that. We also project health insurance increase to be in the neighborhood of 8%. We're still working on that, but budget development, we're well into budget season. I think we probably completed about 3/4 of our initial meetings. We will have follow-ups as necessary, but budget development continues. If there are specific questions relative to any of the standing committees, happy to take them at this time, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you for that update. Any specific questions for the administrator? Okay, move on to item number 6, operational functions required by statute, ordinance, resolution, or policy. Item A, discussion and possible action by exec, and item B is discussion and possible action by exec to forward to the county board for approval on amending ordinance to opt in to the Wisconsin Public Records Board retention schedule. And I would turn it over to Corp Counsel Purner. Corp Counsel, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I get all the exciting topics, so we're going to talk records retention today. When I started as Corporation Counsel, there were a few outdated policies that we wanted to address. One was our procurement code, which was updated a few years ago. Another one was our records retention schedule. Our current records retention schedule was adopted in 1990. And since 1990, a few things have happened related to electronic records. Another thing that has happened is Wisconsin's Public Records Board has really come to assist local governments in creating a general records retention schedule that local governments can adopt. And by adopting that, there is a way to actually simplify records management, because the Public Records Board is the only authority under state law that can create a records retention period less than 7 years. And they do that for certain records that don't need to be stored for 7 years. Without adopting that schedule, we would continue to be operating on a 1990s era records retention schedule that is a little bit cumbersome. This has been a couple years in the making. We actually went through department by department and identified where records are currently being stored, what challenges we have in records retention. There was a big lift by all departments, and then after we started to compile that data, the Public Records Board came out with a completely new records retention schedule, which made a lot of that work, I won't say useless, but a little outdated. So at this point, what the proposal before you would do is, first of all, amend our records retention ordinance, which is section 1.35 of our general code. And the amendments, what they accomplish is they allow us to opt into the State Public Records Board's retention schedule for local units of government. It's specific to county records. It also allows us to not have to continuously do that adoption every time they change it, but we're up to date as long as they continue to update their records retention schedule according to state law. It also retains our requirements to handle records, historical records through the State Historical Society, which is what we're required to do by law. And then it specifically opts in, which is another thing under state law. A county is supposed to either opt in or opt out to these general records schedules, and we haven't done either one of those things. So it's partially a cleanup, partially an assist to our records custodians to make the guidance for how long you retain records consistent with state law, and partially a cleanup of something from 1990. So that's where we are in a nutshell, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I guess the one question that I would have is if the entity were to update the schedule in the future, the way we would draft our ordinance is it would automatically be updated on our ordinance at that point, or would there be necessary board action to update the schedule, I guess is the question.
So every 10 years, the Public Records Board comes out with a new general records schedule. So every 10 years, we would, in theory, opt in to that new schedule, but we wouldn't have to change our ordinance every time.
Okay.
And then in the meantime, the Public Records Board does come out with modifications or additions to their general schedule in the interim of those 10-year periods. Those would automatically update.
Okay. Okay. Is there any prohibition from, if the board saw fit that a system, a particular record was requested to be kept longer than the recommendation? Is there anything against that?
No, if we are going to establish a category different than something that's in the general records schedule, we would need to submit that to the Public Records Board for their approval. Nothing about this prevents us from keeping records longer than the minimum. We just can't destroy records sooner than the minimum. Okay. It's also not a great idea to keep things way longer than the records retention period. But no, that is something that we could do, but we would need to go through the Public Records Board, which is also what we should be doing now anyways.
But the other thing is, if we do start to retain records longer than the recommendations, they are open to open records requests, then would they not be?
Correct. As long as you have a record, it is subject to a request, even if it's beyond the retention period for that record. So as long as we have it, we have to produce it.
Other questions by committee? Other questions by the committee? If not, what is your pleasure? It's stated for action to adopt and move to the full board for consideration. Vice Chair Dickinson?
Mr. Chair, I would,
Vice Chair Dickinson with a motion, and Supervisor Pfeffrick with a second, and then Supervisor Robinson, please.
I was just going to make the motion.
Oh, okay. Well, we have a motion by Vice Chair Dickinson and seconded by Supervisor Pfeffrick to adopt and move to the full board the approval of the records retention records and update our ordinance 1.35 in also. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, say no. Motion is carried and is unanimous, and we will move it on to the full board for next Thursday's discussion. Down to Educational Presentation Committee discussion. Marathon County Comprehensive Plan 2026 update, kickoff of the update process, and we have with us the CPZ Director, Lori Miskimmons. Ms. Kimmons, please.
Oh, I've got to turn that on. So today I also brought with me some staff who the executive committee will predominantly work with. In this update, I have Dennis Lawrence from the North Central Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission and Jeff Pritchard. He's our senior planner at Marathon County Conservation Planning and Zoning. They were both involved in the previous update of the comp plan in 2016 as well. We also have one more planner, Aaron Anklem, who will assist us through this process as well, but he is working on transportation budget deadlines for our MPO this week. So we're gonna keep him on that for now. So last time when we met with the executive committee, we did, is this not sharing? Hang on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Nope.
Tell me.
No, it is.
All right, thank you. Last time when we met with the executive committee, we did talk a little bit about the comprehensive plan update and just sort of setting that stage again for what the comprehensive plan is, that framework to influence future policy with that 20-year horizon, but with that requirement that we update it every 10 years. So it was last updated in 2016, so now we're working towards that 2026 refresh. We also decided that the executive committee would serve as the task force or the committee that would help us develop that update. So in terms of roles and responsibilities, we talked a little bit about this last time as well. We'd be looking to the executive committee to guide that discussion in the direction of the update as it relates to that future county policy that is put forth in the comprehensive plan, and give the administrator direction as it relates to implementation of that plan. The executive committee would also be charged with overseeing communication and discussions with your standing committees, as you all represent a standing committee for the county. We want you to help us carry that message back to your committees in terms of what's going on and help guide those discussions when certain chapters or the areas of the comp plan come before your standing committees, to give that input and help guide that input for their areas of oversight. And help us generate awareness with the supervisors throughout the county board and the public and your stakeholders. Definitely encourage them to give input as it's relevant to their oversight areas, or when they have interest, help bring that input forward as well. One of the things we did want to talk to you all about today was the adoption process that we would use in this update. In working with Corp Counsel and with my planning staff, there was some direction that we need from the executive committee as it relates to how we want to adopt this update. In the 2016 process, we did have a separate task force that was comprised of, I believe, a representative from each of the standing committees, but then that task force would bring forth its recommendations on the comp plan to the ERC as its plan commission and the executive committee. This time around with the update, since we're calling it more of a refresh, it's a little bit of a lighter touch. We have gone with using the executive committee as that task force. And in looking through state statute and looking through our Chapter 2 Code of Ordinances, it's not clear exactly where the adoption process or how the ERC should be included in that adoption process. Historically, it has gone, a draft and a public participation plan would go through the ERC as well before proceeding to county board. And best planning practice would also suggest that it would go through our standing committee that acts as our plan commission, but it is definitely not laid out or required that it happen that way. So we wanted to bring that conversation forth to the executive committee to determine when we bring something forth that needs a recommendation to go to county board, how do you believe it should proceed? Should it just proceed through the executive committee, or should it also go through the ERC before going to county board? So I wanted to pause there and open that up for conversation.
So let's open it up for discussion. So if we get some recommendations as far, well, one, the public participation plan, do you want the executive committee, and I think the question that Ms. Kimmons is asking is, do we want just the executive committee to approve it and move it to the full board, or do we approve it, send it to ERC, have ERC approve it, and then to the full board, I think is the real question.
This would apply to the public participation plan as well as the drafts. So, and again, in 2016, you did move it through both ERC and the exec before going to county board, but you also had a separate task force that was developing the plan at that time. So,
Discussion. Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
So just to be clear, you're just asking about these two items, or you're asking about every decision that we make throughout the process will also go to ERC?
anything that would be moved forward to county board for adoption, so that would include the public participation plan, the draft, and the final document. And I should add, you know, as we develop the update, there's going to be chapters that are relevant to certain standing committees, and those will always go to those standing committees for input before coming back to the executive board. So
just as a follow-up then.
Go ahead, please.
If those items go to a standing committee, we wouldn't be looking for their approval of it, but just their input of it, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Other discussion? Thoughts? Again, Supervisor Pfifferich, please.
I think as we look at this process and having executive committee is the task force, I think it makes sense that we work through the task force with these items, or excuse me, the executive committee. I think there'd be duplication if we went to ERC with it, and frankly, anybody on ERC is welcome to come to our meetings if they so choose. They're videotaped and everything. So ultimately, the decision comes down to the county board at the end of the day. All ERC members are included on that.
Okay, any other thoughts? Supervisor Drabek, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just wondering why the ERC committee was involved like that last time.
because they are our plan commission for the county, So there is some stuff in Chapter 2 that indicates that long-term planning documents related to environment and community resources would go through the ERC, but in talking with Corp Counsel, we didn't think it was clear that it said comprehensive plan. And state statute doesn't give us guidance on this as well.
Other discussion? Supervisor Pfiffer, please.
And I think as part of the process, obviously, the ERC is going to be heavily involved in some of those chapters just based on their work and what they do. So they're going to be involved in bringing it forward. It's not that they're going to be left out of the process by any means, but I think just as having one focal point that it comes through executive to county board, I think that simplifies the process.
And as I think as Ms. Kimmons pointed out, each of the chapters that impacts each of the standing committees will have discussions at those standing committees as well, not just ERCs. So the ones that impact infrastructure will be discussed at infrastructure. The ones that are discussed around economic development, health and human safety, they will all be discussed. Those chapters will all be discussed at each of those standing committees. Any other discussion?
Chair,
Go ahead, Supervisor Robinson.
I would agree with Supervisor Pfiffer. I think it will be important that we keep all the committees appraised of it, but seek their input through the process. I think having the executive committee handle the public participation and recommendation reduces the potential for confusion of roles. And as long as we are continuing throughout the process to engage those committees, I think it's okay.
So I think the consensus I'm hearing is that the recommendation will be that the executive committee will be the approval and then move it to the full board rather than moving it back to to the ERC standing committee. Okay.
So we'll develop the timeline with that in mind, so thank you.
Yep.
All right. As I mentioned, you will also have county and regional planning staff staffing this update effort. So we will be managing all aspects of the update in terms of the timeline, the schedule, getting the materials prepared, getting notices out to the public, all of those things. Our goal is to get them to you in advance so that we can have them here at the meetings for discussion, and again, distributing it widely to make sure that we're getting that input that we need and in a timely fashion, but trying to stay on schedule to hopefully get this adopted by 2026. So. And as part of that, we also will include extensive coordination with our department heads as it relates to the chapters that are relevant to their areas of oversight as well. So. In the packet, we did include a tentative timeline for how we would work through this update. It does involve meeting about every other month with the executive committee. In the in-between months, there would be work that we would be doing with the standing committees or behind the scenes to prepare things for that next meeting. And occasionally, we may have to meet with you each month that you meet to make sure we're getting the input we need and keep the schedule moving forward. It's also tentative because we do want to start discussing with you what elements of the plan you like from last time and want to keep, and make sure if we're moving forward with a very similar plan or if we're putting new chapters or things in there, then we may have to adjust the schedule to respond to that. So as it relates to the existing plan or how we get this started, I liked the way Dennis Lawrence from the Regional Planning Commission put it to me last week. He said, we have to pull it apart a little before we put it back together. So I did want to just open it up today for any initial thoughts or discussion on the plan that we have now and what the committee sort of thinks of it and how it tracks with them. Does it work? Does it not work? Related to that, a couple things that guide us are what the state law says about what elements must be included in our comprehensive plan. So they do have 9 areas that must be included. That doesn't mean there has to be a chapter for chapter match to that. Last time around with our comprehensive plan, the overarching goal that guided it was the healthiest, safest, and most prosperous county in the state. And from there, the committee decided that there would be 13 chapters that would sort of lay out what that meant, what the existing conditions were, and what our goals and objectives were. So there's areas of discussion where, there might be things where you think things have changed and we need to address different topics or different chapters, or you might say the plan is working very well as it is. So I just wanted to start that initial discussion with you all today, so I'll open it up for comment.
Comments from the committee? Supervisor Robinson, please. John, you might be still on mute.
Yeah, I never took my hand down, so I.
Oh, okay.
But
Go
I
ahead.
will. So is there? You're not talking about the number of chapters, but whether we want to continue to work off of the previous one as a base. Is that what you're looking for input on?
I can't quite hear him. What did he say?
John, can you speak up? You can't quite. We're missing part of the conversation. Can you speak up?
The static is brought to you by Frontier.
The commercial, is that a commercial endorsement? Never mind.
It's the only option.
So I think you were asking. I think what I heard was that you were asking. Am I asking? Do you guys like the number of chapters there are, or is it more about the content? I think it's more about the content, like the way the plan is laid out and what is included in there. Certainly, we've had internal talks too about the level of detail as well. That there's probably areas where we could back off on some of the level of detail. I think there were 120 some objectives last time around. It was higher than that. Okay. So, there's certain things where, I think we'll continue to have that conversation about the level of detail, but overall, the plan as it exists from 2016, you've had to work with, many of you have been here for multiple terms, so you've had to work with it. How does it work for you as a policy document, I think is where I want to start the discussion. So.
Thoughts? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
I guess I wouldn't see a need. I don't think there's anything glaring that isn't already in the document as these chapters are listed out. The framework is there. I would be more on the reduction side than adding in. I really don't think anything has changed in the past 10 years in that regard.
And from my standpoint, I think there's a couple of things that stand out to me. We have tremendous amount of information that in some cases is information that's available. We may not need to have all of that information spelled out inside the plan, because it may be accessible someplace else. That becomes a duplication and expands the plan. So I think that level of specificity is something that to me seems a little bit redundant or repetitive. Other thoughts? Supervisor Pfiffer, please.
I think generally how it lays out is very nice in terms of covering, requirements of what we need to do and also adding in some of our more local flavor to everything. So I like the general layout. I do think there can be some areas where we can shorten things up and just be more concise. Obviously, when you have a document of this size, there's very few people that are going to read the entire document. So I think having a really strong introduction and just the summary, I really like what the county has done in terms of the strategic plan and how we're able to take all of this and really filter it down to focus on, because you get all the different objectives in there. It's overwhelming, frankly, but by being able to take that and really prioritize what we want to do in the short term, I think it's well laid out.
I think that's one of the things that we've seen, because of the massive amount of objectives that we have there, and we've filtered it even down to the strategic plans, some of the shorter term goals. I think one of the challenges that it creates is, there's some level of expectation of movement on some of those, and then it becomes a capacity issue. And I think that creates some of there's expectations that we're going to make movement, but because of capacity, we've got to be more understanding of where those and therefore maybe throttle the expectations to some extent. Other thoughts? Okay.
Okay, yeah, and we will probably be coming back to this conversation a couple more times. We just wanted to start it here with this group today, so. One of the first things we do actually need to accomplish in our timeline is to get a public participation plan moving forward to the county board for adoption. So that's something we need to do in the next couple months. And in the packet today, I did put a draft public participation plan in there, and I'm going to turn it over to our senior planner, Jeff Pritchard, to just run through it.
Thank you. I'm going to go off this by memory because I'm not sure if I can see it. So I'll just go off the cuff.
There you go.
The public participation plan, we do have a draft form. It's very similar to the PPP plan that was developed 10 years ago. So I'm glad to hear the path that you guys are working toward. Want to reduce it to some degree, if you will, because there were a ton of objectives, goals, and action steps, and I think it may have overwhelmed some department heads and staff and our ability to meet that goal. In the public participation plan, I obviously modified the standing committees because that changed over the last 10 years. It reads very similar to a great degree. The only thing I really changed in the document would be, if you flip down to, there we go, the internal input process. That pretty much stayed the same because we have to do certain elements to gain information and be better informed to create the document from an internal standpoint. So we'll follow the same processes that we did the last time. The input for the general public, there's two elements there. There's one which is following the WIPS process. We're going to inform them. We'll have some meetings in terms of informing the general public. With the data that we have, I cut down the number of meetings from 12 to 6 because we didn't really have the public input and curiosity, if you will. So that was a bit overkill. And we plan on updating and informing all throughout the process the Eastern and Western Towns Association meetings because obviously we touch base with local communities at that point. And then obviously we're looking at developing a community survey with a twist. And we're going to use that in conjunction with the report that's generated every 2 years because that kind of sets the tone for what are our needs, where are we weak in certain areas, do we need child care services to be improved, right, for an example, which is one that actually is. Are we providing services properly for police, right, things like that. So part of the process with the opinion survey, if you will, is to use that. And once we have our goals, objectives, and action steps developed, hopefully reduced, use this survey to have the general public kind of prioritize or rank what they feel is important to them, and then that better informs the elected officials and county board and the administration in terms of where should we allocate our human resources and financial resources, and is it a realistic expectation, right? So some of these things, I remember the last time we did this, there were lots of ideas and concepts and issues that were coming up, but we didn't really, as a county, have a role to address it. So we need those guardrails set in place so that it helps us generate hopefully a more user-friendly, comprehensive plan. And then the rest of the document, the last few pages of it, is essentially citing state statutes for the approval process. So, but if you have any questions, feel free to give me a call, contact me, or ask me right now.
Well, I was just going to, I think one thing with the survey is instead of doing a survey towards the beginning of the process, we're looking at doing it more in the middle to the end of the process. So, because we were talking that if you ask everyone if they want better roads, they'll probably say yes, you know. So maybe an upfront survey is not going to give us as much value as doing something after we have a more developed update and can ask people where those priorities are. So.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, it's been my experience, and I'm sure Randy could probably agree with this as well. You're going to have certain topic issues that are common throughout anywhere in the United States. Safety, roads, improved roads, better schools, better parks, recreation, those types of things. That's a constant. So we're not going to gain much more information from that. But if we provide the necessary information to them in a timely manner to better inform us in terms of where we should place our priorities, I think we'll gain much more information that way.
Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Thank you. So my question is, would it be wise to, I know we're looking for input from municipalities, but would it be wise to give almost a very similar survey that you're asking the community to the municipalities, like the same set of questions, so that you could kind of compare, because the people who are within those municipalities obviously are making those decisions on a continual basis, whether it be their board or someone in their department or something like that. Because again, you might see a different flavor. And, you know, we have that relationship with the municipalities. So I would just offer that up as something to consider.
Yeah, we can incorporate that in. So.
But I think you're going to have two, well, I don't know, I shouldn't assume that we'll get, but I think you're right. I think you've got a level of information that the elected officials of various municipalities and understanding of government that they have versus everyday citizen has expectations and understanding. So I think that you may get two different sets of results, but I don't want to put them together, but I think providing them separate in two separate surveys might be more beneficial.
Yeah, and sorry, Randy. I think, you know, once we also receive that survey, that would certainly help out with the development and creating a new strategic plan. Because if you recall what we did last time, we used a community-based group, community leaders, if you will, and then we had the same process with our county board officials,
Elected officials,
just to see how they aligned up, and then we had a discussion where there weren't alignment and what came to the top. So it kind of spearheads our process into the strategic plan development, and it should make it a little bit easier.
Supervisor Fisher?
Yeah, I like the idea of what the opinion survey is looking at in terms of where it's timing out in the process. I think there's a lot of value in that. I would agree. I mean, early in the process, there's very similar things that folks are going to be looking for, but when we can actually get in there and weigh them a little bit. My question is what kind of tools are you looking at to gather that input? You know, it's asking a lot for people to come to a meeting or different things like that, and the easier we can make it for people to provide their input, I think the more valuable input that we'd get.
Yeah, at this point, we've had initial discussions. Nothing's been finalized at this point, but we certainly agree with you.
Other discussion? Other discussion on the public participation plan tentative draft. Okay.
So then our next step would be to take the input you gave us today. If you have additional input, we will incorporate that. Just email myself or Jeff so that we can get that incorporated, and we will bring it back to you in October for consideration of adoption. And then we will start working on the timeline to be back with you probably in November to start working on some initial discussion related to some of the chapters. So
Okay.
that's it for today, unless anyone has any other questions.
Any other questions or comments? Vice Chair Dickinson, please.
Is there anything you require of us as committee members ahead of that? Are there particular sections of the comp plan maybe we should delve into? Should
So
we?
we'll send out some information, like give you guys a little homework ahead of the November meeting, just to have you look at certain sections. And we will remind you for additional input on the public participation plan before bringing it back in October. So
Okay. Thank you so very much.
thank you.
Jeff, anything final comments? Dennis, any?
Nothing other than we're looking forward to getting the process moving along.
Okay, very good. Any other, from committee members, any other discussion, any other information? Okay, we'll go back then to the agenda. And the next item that I put on the agenda to discuss and have each of you potentially discuss with your committees, at your committees. We've had a few in various committees, several individuals, board members have not been able to or haven't provided a timely notices that they're not going to be in attendance of meetings. And I think I'm asking each of you to have those discussions with your committees, so that, I think there's an expectation because you go through the effort to develop the agenda, get additional people and resources committed to the agenda, and to have the meeting, and then lo and behold, you don't want to have a meeting where you don't have a quorum because you knew 3 people were going to be missing, and then lo and behold, one additional person didn't bother to let you know, and now you've got to cancel a meeting. So I'm asking each of you to have those discussions with each of your standing committees and the membership of those committees, and hopefully they can be, understanding that it's critical that they notify the clerk or the chair of each of those committees, yourselves, or the staff support person, so that we're sitting there and not having to cancel meetings because of a lack of a quorum. Because I think there's expectations that the public has when we were elected that we're going to do our job. So I would just, I've seen it on various committees and I've seen it at the county board. So I'm not going to call out any one particular individual, or I'm just throwing it out for discussion and have discussions, and hopefully you can take it back to each of your standing committees so that they can relay it to each of the committee members. Any thoughts or discussion on that topic? Okay. Okay, next meeting date, committee members are asked to bring ideas on future agenda discussion items. In our next committee meeting is a misprint on this agenda. It is not October 17th, it is October 10th. So please make that correction on your calendars. The next executive committee is scheduled for October 10th at 3 p.m. With that, we are down to item number 9. What is your pleasure? Motion by Vice Chair Dickinson and second by Supervisor Drabek to adjourn. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Have a great rest of your week and a great weekend. It looks like the weather is going to be enjoyable yet.